Chapter 1, Ashford Bay. Part 5, Dr. Avery. Morning pared the fog thin but wouldn't let it go. The lighthouse slept with one eye open, the beam dulled to a tired blink. Ashford Bay smelled like coffee trying to apologize to salt. I shaved with water that had no opinion on comfort and read the Chronicle while the travel alarm remembered how to tick. The headline had learned a name overnight and printed it like a funeral program: local fisherman lost near teeth. No photograph this time. A line promised county pathologist to examine and let the rest trail off, polite as a widow at the door. The police station lived where the post office used to, a brick box with a flag that thought it had seen enough wine for one lifetime. Inside smelled of wood polish and paper that expected signatures. A brass rack still held the ghosts of mail slots. The counter where stamps had been sold now sold patience. Sheriff Harvey wasn't in the front. The deputy behind the desk was young enough to be practicing his mustache. He took in my hat and my notebook and made a small bureaucrat's decision. "Dr. Avery won't be interrupted," he said, and waited to see if that would be enough. "I don't interrupt," I said. "I observe rudely." He gave me a look that contained both amusement and instructions to leave. I stayed. He sighed, rang a bell, and a door opened onto a hallway that forgot about windows early on. Dr. Avery had made a room out of white tile and good lighting in the back where the building used to keep parcels. 50, I guessed, and running a tight ledger with time. Gray hair pinned back without romance. Apron clean by choice, not by lack of work. She glanced at me the way a surgeon glances at a weather report, useful if accurate. "You're the writer," she said. "Not a question." "Jonathan Reed." "Dr. Margaret Avery." She lifted her chin toward a sink. "Washington. The dead don't need what you brought in on your fingers." I obeyed. The water was cold and honest. When I came up beside her, she had a sheet folded at the waist of a man who had run out of days. The body wore the late dignity of labor. Rope had chafed his hands in his lifetime. The sea had done its usual work after. "You knew him?" she asked. "I know the type," I said. "Name?" "Ephraim Pike," she said, and made it medical by keeping it flat. 48. Wife, 2 sons, a boat with a carburetor that owed him money. She tapped at the scalp above a bruised crescent. Blunt trauma, occipital. Not a clean edge. Could be a rail. Could be a rock. Could be a man with clumsy hands and a heavy conscience. Drowning? "Froth in the lungs," she said. "Salt where fresh should be. Time of death near midnight, give or take a margin the ocean insists on." She lifted a forearm with careful fingers. "See here. Abrasion on the wrist, shallow, not deep enough for a rope that bore weight. More like a tie that said stay without shouting." "Paint," I said. It came out before permission. On the shirt cuff a smear no longer red glinted as rust might under a street lamp. "You see it," she said. "So do I, microscopic, but there. Old men fall into their own boats and find every color in the harbor." She lifted an eyebrow as if to measure me against the room. "Do you have an alternative hypothesis?" "I have a pocket," I said, "and a coin that used to be a seal." I took out the lead and placed it on the tray as if it could object. "Found near the cut in the rocks." She didn't touch it. She looked the way a teacher looks at a student's handwriting. "Who stamped it?" "A star inside a ring," I said. "No letters." She moved the tray with the end of a scalpel as if the distance mattered. "We used to seal crates like that during the war. Some outfits never stopped. Contraband likes a uniform, even when the war is done." "You sound like you know contraband." "I know men," she said. "Contraband is just men relabeled." She went back to the work as if it had been waiting for her to remember it. "I will write drowning with cranial trauma and the sheriff will read it like scripture until he doesn't." "Sheriff Harvey reads?" "He reads people," she said. "He leaves the Latin to me." She stripped off a glove and met my eyes for the first time with the full weight of her attention. You will not print that lead seal before I decide whether it matters. I don't print anything before the truth holds still, I said. I'm not sure it knows how just yet. Her face allowed an expression that might be respect if you squinted. Mr. Reed, grief sells to men like you. Don't make me your editor. I've had worse. You will again. She nodded to the deputy who had pretended not to be listening so well you could hear the effort. Tell Sheriff Harvey our fisherman kept his last breath longer than his balance. The hallway gave me back to the front counter. On the way out I passed a bulletin board with notices about nets for sale and a card for Pike and Sons, repair, haul, paint. The paint on the card had been printed a bright red some months ago. Time had taken its cut. Outside, the town had tried on daylight and found it large in the shoulders. Jimmy sold headlines with less ceremony than yesterday. When he saw me, he thumbed his cap and looked past me the way boys check for authority. You hear about Mr. Pike, he said. I heard. Mrs. Pike's at the church. Father Thomas said words on the hour. He squinted toward the steeple. He says a lot when he wants to say nothing. The doc's office? I asked. Closed, he said. Harbormaster's gone to look at a motor that will never confess. Clerk's supposed to be there, but he ain't. Name of the clerk? Jimmy's mouth did a little proud line. I sell papers, mister. Names cost extra. I paid extra. He took the coin like it was a handshake and gave up his prize. Eli Morse. He counts slow and writes neat. Lives over the net loft. Don't tell him I told you. He's got eyes like a gull. I went to the wharf. The office wore a door with old paint and a new lock. The window set into it had wire diamonds through the glass. Inside, a desk remembered a long day. On the far wall a rack of clipboards made a brave show. Second drawer of the west wall file had a tiny scratch near the pull, fresh enough to catch the light with ambition. I tried the knob for form's sake and got honesty for my trouble. Through the glass I made a surveyor's note, a ledger-sized rectangle of dust clean on the shelf behind the desk, as if something had stood there long enough to earn it and then left in a hurry. Footsteps on planks behind me made the wharf speak. I didn't turn too soon. When I did, a man stood considering me from under a cap the color of wet rope. Neat in his clothes. Hands that preferred paper to line. Can I help you? He said. Eli Morse. You can read, he said. What is it you're looking for? Yesterday, I said. And any page that decided not to belong to it. We don't keep philosophy here, he said. Just weights and destinations. His gaze flicked to my shoulder like it counted the scuff there and worried about something he didn't say. Office opens at 11. You can file a request then. The harbor's in a hurry, I said. It's always been punctual. Today it can wait. He took a key from his pocket and considered the lock like a man judging a dog's temper. You're the one with the hat that doesn't like our weather. It prefers roofed streets, I said. He fitted the key and paused. In the wire glass the reflection of his hand showed a bandage on the web between thumb and finger, small and recent. He saw me see it and turned the key quick. 11, he said to the air, and went inside alone. Church bells told the town what time it was no matter what time it wanted to be. I followed them up the rise to a limestone church that had been scraped by weather and polished by money. Stained glass held ships and saints in the same light and managed not to choose. Father Thomas met me on the steps, a tall man carved by rule. His collar drew a straight line under a face trained not to frown too often. The eyes had the weight of somebody who could keep a secret until it turned into a stone. Mr. Reed, he said. We don't open our doors for questions. We open them for prayers. Some questions are prayers, I said. Not in my experience. He looked past my shoulder at the harbor with the long, slow charity of a man who had forgiven it more times than it deserved. You are here about the Pike family. I'm here about a ledger, I said, and watched the turn of his head measure out one beat more before he came back to me. The church keeps records, he said. Of baptisms, marriages, and the dead. We do not keep ledgers for the harbor. The blessing of the fleet. A tradition, he said. For the living. Ink is for the living, too, I said. And sometimes for ghosts. He let silence do a minute's work. Walk with me, he said at last, as if choosing a lesser sin. We went along the nave, where the saints held their glass like opinions. He stopped at a side door to the sacristy that was locked because the world is the world. Through the little window I could see shelves, a vestment bag, a polished brass ewer, and a narrow gap on the middle board where dust had drawn a rectangle around nothing. Renovations? I asked. Order, he said. We lend to committees that keep our festivals tidy. Things return. He took a key ring from a pocket and didn't use it. Mr. Reed, Ashford Bay has learned to live with the sea by refusing to count certain losses too closely. You may think that a sin. I think it survival. Survival is a fine word, I said. So is truth. The lighthouse is for truth, he said. My work is mercy. He nodded toward the door. There is nothing in there you need. Not today. Tomorrow. Tomorrow is the Lord's concern, he said, which meant no. He held the door of the church open for me and the air outside gave us the smell of rope and diesel and new bread from a bakery that worked early. On the step, a parish boy with a broom had chalk on his knuckles. When our eyes met he hid his hand and failed. There was the simple eye, fresh and struck through, whispering up from the skin before he could scrub it off. Father Thomas didn't look at the boy. He looked at me. Mr. Reed, he said gently, this town does not take well to men who insist on tidying what the tide leaves. I never was tidy, I said. Then you may yet be forgiven, he said, and left me with the bells still counting in the air.